So today I thought I would talk once again about my undying love for Treasure Island. This book is one of my favorite books, one of the first classics I ever read, and one of the reasons why I actually started to believe that I could like classic literature, because in the past I thought that it just wasn't for me, that I was too dumb to read it, and that I would never really enjoy it. But then I read Treasure Island and everything changed. So I would like to talk about why I think Treasure Island is the perfect starting place for classical literature, and especially for children reading classical literature. And I mean, it doesn't have to be Treasure Island. It could be any book similar to it, but I think Treasure Island is definitely a good starting place and something that people should consider, especially if you're trying to get your kids to read classical literature. So, what makes Treasure Island so special? Well, it doesn't read like normal classical literature would, in my opinion. And I mean, my idea of classical literature growing up was these thick, boring, slow-paced books that were just filled with drama and there wasn't really much action involved. And I knew it wasn't for me. It wasn't my type of book. And I was like, yeah, smart people, academics, they read those type of things, but I just want a fun book that I actually enjoy to read. So I thought, that's not classical literature. And then I stumbled across Treasure Island. And this was one of my dad's favorite books, still is. He grew up with it, and it really introduced him to a love of reading. And so he's a teacher, and he was having his students read it. And I went to the school, but I was in a lower grade, so I didn't end up reading it with that class. But one of my friends who was in his class read it, and she hated it. She thought that it was the most boring, awful book she'd ever read. And so me, being the snarky middle schooler that I was like, oh really? Well, I gotta see if that's actually true or not. So I'm going to read this book out of spite. And little did I know that I would fall in love with it and it would become one of my favorite books and show me that classical literature could be a lot of fun and really exciting. And I think a large part of the reason why I enjoyed it so much is because it didn't read like normal classical literature that I had read before. It was fast-paced, it had interesting characters, the plot was exciting. It was a little more challenging to read than a lot of the modern books I picked up prior to that, but it was rewarding in the sense that as I was reading it, I felt smarter because I was reading these bigger words. I was understanding what was going on. You can picture the emotions and accents and reactions of these characters in this book, and there's a lot of payoff in that. To be reading this thing that's a little more complicated to read, but that is enjoyable and easy to understand in the midst of that. What better place to dive into classical literature than pirates, mystery, and nonstop action? Treasure Island is kind of unique among classical literature because it's very much targeted towards a younger audience. Stories like this and like White Fang and The Call of the Wild and stories like that are more towards a younger audience of boys. They're very action-centric. They're a little easier to read, and they were made for children growing up in that time period. They weren't made for adults, like books like, I don't know, Anna Karenina or stuff like that were geared towards a very mature audience. These books were just meant to be fun reads and to engage the reader. And I think that we forget that when we're looking at classical literature today. We see all of these books as adult books, difficult books to read, books you have to read to get your high school diploma, things like that. And we stop remembering that some of them were made for a more mature audience, and others, like Treasure Island and The Call of the Wild and ones like that, were meant to be fun, exciting reads that would engage the reader. The book is full of action and colorful characters, a plot that goes non-stop. It just keeps you on the edge of your seat as you're racing through it, and you're wondering if the characters are going to survive till the end. There's physical action, sword fighting, the thrill of wondering if you're going to survive a shipwreck or being stranded on an island, searches for treasure, subterfuge, betrayals. It has it all. And I mean, every kid should love this book. If you like Pirates of the Caribbean, if you like The Princess Bride, if you like just Peter Pan, books like that, stories like that, then you're going to like books like Treasure Island. I mean, I feel like the pirates aspect of it by itself is exciting enough to hook any young reader. If only more schools would introduce students to books like Treasure Island to start with, I think children and then eventually adults would be a lot more engaged in classical literature and be craving to read these classical literature books and wouldn't be afraid of it in a way that I was afraid of classical literature for a very long time. I thought that I wasn't smart enough to read it. And books like Treasure Island make you feel like you can read classical literature, and they make you enjoy it. And it would also help adults and children growing up to not resent the idea of reading classical literature, especially as schools are demanding them to read books that they do not enjoy. When I think of my top list of classical literature books that I would reread over and over and over again, it goes something like this: Treasure Island, Dracula, Hamlet. Is it a coincidence that they're all fast-paced, thriller-esque books with interesting characters? I don't think so. They're the type of story that really resonates with a reader and leads them to just keep reaching for that book over and over again and wanting to read more like it. And that's why I really think books like Treasure Island are the perfect starting place for new readers. And if you're trying to get into classical literature, I would highly recommend reading this book. If you're trying to get your kids to read more books, I'd highly recommend reading this book. You can read it to them. It's the type of book that really is engaging read aloud. My dad always told me stories of his Irish English teacher reading this book out loud to the class and doing the best accents and impersonations for each of the characters, and how much that impacted him as a reader and led him to love literature growing up. And I think Treasure Island really had a similar impact on me, where it really led me to enjoy reading and enjoy classical literature and know that I was capable of reading it and that I enjoyed it. So if you have any comments on other books besides Treasure Island that you think are great starting points for classical literature, that you think kids in particular would really enjoy, then please leave a comment down below. Let me know if you've read Treasure Island and what you thought of it. And if you like this video, please subscribe and like it. And I'll see you in the next one.